Monsey, where I was from. In the Charedi world, making Aliyah wasn't something that was seen as acceptable, normal, made sense. Most people thought I was crazy. And it didn't make sense to me why so many people in America should think it's crazy. I mean, I was in Israel as a bacher. I learned in yeshiva here, and I knew it was an incredible place, but there seemed to be a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings, and lack of information. And so when I made Aliyah a couple of years ago, I decided I want to try to break some of those stereotypes and try to promote Charedi Aliyah towards from Jews in America, Charedi Jews from Jews, to people that ordinarily would think that it's impossible, that it's crazy, that it's not for them, it's for other people. I want to show them that it's not only is it possible, viable, it's really a major upgrade in their life, in many ways, in their life, in their family's life. So I started working on the Charedi Aliyah activism 2.5 years ago, and my most recent project is called Nachliel, nachliel.org. Please check it out and join. Basically, Nachliel.org. It's an organization that promotes Charedi Aliyah to Americans, and we're doing several projects kind of simultaneously. But the main focus that we're working on right now is creating a documentary of real life in Israel for American Haredim, breaking stereotypes, showing what really is on the ground, what really exists, what kind of communities exists for American Haredim, what kind of schools exist, what kind of chinuch is available, what kind of job opportunities are here. There's a lot of misconceptions, misinformation, and so we're trying to break all those stereotypes. And so our first project, we're actually coming out with a video on chinuch in about a week, or maybe even less. It's going to be on our website, so I suggest you to check it out when you have time. And so yeah, that's a little bit about our organization. So before I get to the agenda, I just want to give one quick little story that I think is relevant for this evening. I actually made Aliyah 2.5 years ago with my grandmother. My grandmother wasn't religious per se, but we lived together since my grandfather passed away. We lived together for 7 years, and she lived with us in Monsey. And when she and her family were escaping Russia in the 70s, in 1976, so like everybody else, they stopped over in Austria. And while their paperwork was getting finalized, and when they got to the airport, and there was 2 lines at the airport. One line was for Israel, and the other line was for America. And everybody, when they got there, they had to choose. Most people, made up their minds in advance. With my family, it was a fight until the last minute. They got to the airport, and they were moving suitcases back and forth from one line to the other line. My grandfather, he was very enamored with America, American cigarettes, American cars, American clothing. America was just a dream for him, a dream come true. So he couldn't wait to get to America. My grandmother, when she got to the airport, she saw the lines of people that were there. And it could be a coincidence that particular day might have been different, but she saw the types of people standing on the line to America and the types of people standing on the line to Israel. And the people on the line to Israel were these young, sympathichny, energetic, optimistic people. And she just saw the looks on their faces, and she just wanted to be a part of it. And she also mentioned there was a dziadushka that's 100 years old on a wheelchair. Only an optimist could come make Aliyah 100 years old on a wheelchair. And so she saw the people, she saw the looks on their face. She wanted to be a part of that. And so she pushed the luggage towards the Israel line. And then my grandfather pushed it back to the American line. And in the end, my grandfather won. They moved to America, and thanks to them, I was born, so I can't complain. But the interesting thing about this whole story is that in the end, my grandfather, he died. He's actually buried in Monsey, New York. And my grandmother, she was able to make it to Eretz Yisrael. She lived here for the last 2 years of her life, and she's buried in Eretz Yisrael. And we were talking. She passed away a couple of months ago, and we were mentioning at the funeral that it's incredible that that little action that she did at the airport in Austria, 40 years ago, of moving the suitcase, maybe in the schus of that one action, she merited being able to move to Eretz Yisrael, to live here, to bring 4 generations to Israel, and to be buried here. Everybody got what they wanted. My grandfather got what he wanted, America, and she got what she wanted. And so the point of the story is not just to tell a story, it's that it teaches you a lesson that even if you do a little action and you show that you're interested and you show that you care and you show initiative and you take some sort of little action, just even moving a suitcase, it'll have repercussions. It'll get back to you in the end. You'd be surprised how much could happen from one little bit of initiative, even if it doesn't work out right away. It could be in a year, it could be in 5 years, but the most important thing is just that first initial spark, and you never know what'll come out of it. So anyway, the agenda for today: why make Aliyah, preparing to make the decision, how to and not to research, pilot trip tips, picking the right community, laying the groundwork with the family, and common mistakes post Aliyah. Okay, so the most common mistakes, in my opinion, happen before Aliyah. That's why most people haven't made it here, because they've made too many mistakes and they weren't able to get here. The different stages: deciding what you want, the research aspect, the logistical planning, post-Aliyah adjustment period, different stages. Each have its own challenges, each have its own pitfalls. The biggest, most significant challenge is just really just deciding. Once you make that decision that this is what you want to do, everything else, not to say that it's easy, but you have this clarity of this is what you want to do, this is your goal, and you're willing to fight for it, and you can achieve it as long as you get to that point where you make that decision. This is what I want. And so it's worth it. And another thing I want to mention here is that as I said before, most of the mistakes happen in the research and planning. So it really is a major investment, and it's totally worth your while to spend the time and do the proper research, as we'll discuss. That could really be the difference between success and failure, just people that are set up before they come. So it's that. Why make Aliyah? One second, let me just move something out of the way here. Okay. People ask me this all the time: why did I make Aliyah? So in Monsey, which is a very Jewish town, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a minion bus. There's a Monsey Trails bus that goes from Monsey to Wall Street to Midtown. And on the bus, the passengers have a minion. And the most modern bus, they even stop on the side of the highway for davening. In Eretz Yisrael, the drivers are part of the minion. As you can see, the Egged bus driver here, he's putting on his tefillin and talis while driving a bus. Why I made Aliyah? Because of guys like this. It's a place for Jews. It's where a Jew can be a Jew. It can't get more Jewish than Eretz Yisrael. It's home. It's home. And a lot of people ask this question: why make Aliyah? It's funny. When I was leaving my job in the States, I had non-Jewish coworkers, and when I was leaving, I told them I'm making Aliyah. I'm moving to Israel, and they said, "Wow, that's amazing. That's great. That's what they didn't ask. Why am I making Aliyah? Isn't it dangerous? What's there? How are you gonna make a living? Or where are you gonna send your kids to school?" Or they're like, "What? You're Jewish? Of course you're making Aliyah. That makes sense." For them, it wasn't a question. It's the Jews that always have the question: why are you making Aliyah? So, if you look at from the Torah's perspective, whenever the Torah mentions the greatest blessing for Klal Yisrael is being in the land. As Hashem gives a bracha to the land, you live in the land, you'll live in security, you'll live in peace, you'll have all your needs met, you'll have parnasa. The rains will come in their time. That's how the Torah describes true blessing to the Jewish people. And what's the greatest curse? Golus, getting kicked out of the land. That's when the Torah mentions all the curses that'll come upon Klal Yisrael when they sin, when they do Averis. So it mentioned that the main curse, if Hashem wants to curse Klal Yisrael, what's the main curse? Getting kicked out. And we've been in that state of getting kicked out for 2,000 years, and we sort of have forgotten that it's a curse. We've become accustomed to it, but if you look in the Torah, it's really the greatest curse there is. So I can't tell you why to make Aliyah. I mean, every person has to have their own reason, has to really think about it and feel it. And I would suggest not depending on other people's reasons, because times are going to get tough, and you're going to make Aliyah. Not every day is going to be perfect. There are going to be some days that are incredible, amazing, and you wonder why I didn't make Aliyah 10 years earlier. And there's going to be difficult days. So when it does get difficult, it's always good to have in mind to remember, like, why did I come? What were my reasons? Why do I want to be here? And that'll motivate you. That'll push you. So you shouldn't take other people's reasons as your reason. You have to have, every person has to really think about it and have their reason and keep it close to them to reference in the future. Pitfalls in deciding to make Aliyah. So you're going to hear a lot of terrible things from people when you ask about Aliyah, when you go to your community, when you go to your friends, mentors. They're going to say, there's no parnasa there. The kids are all off the derech. What are you doing? And you don't speak Hebrew. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm not saying ignore what they're saying. There are definitely issues. There's risks. There's challenges. There's things you need to take into account. But the worst thing you could do is depend on those people to make your decision, that say those types of things. Why? Because the people that you're talking to that are saying those types of things in the States, they obviously are not living in Israel. So they're one of two categories. They've either never lived in Israel, so they just don't know, and they've heard things, or they have lived in Israel, they made Aliyah, but didn't succeed and moved back. And I'm not blaming them. There's nothing wrong with somebody who tried to make Aliyah, it didn't work. Everything is hashkacha, and Hashem is ultimately in control of who succeeds and who fails. I'm not saying they did anything wrong, but the bottom line is that when you want to succeed in something, you want to talk to someone who's succeeded, not someone who has no experience or who has failed. So speaking to people in the States, speaking to the 1% that have failed or the people that have never moved there, isn't going to give you accurate information. So that's one thing. That's one big pitfall, is relying too much on people who really don't have the correct information or very biased information. We're really the 1% that didn't succeed. That's a big pitfall, relying on that too much. Not to ignore it, but just don't rely on it too much. Do your research, speak to the people that are really here and have succeeded. One other thing that I noticed is that everybody, when I was doing my research, when I was back in the States, in New York, and I was asking around, should I make Aliyah, should I not? I always thought that, there must be some big reason out there why people aren't making Aliyah. And because of that reason, American Jews are in America. There must be some reason out there that's the real reason why everybody doesn't come. But what I found is everybody that I spoke to that suggested against it, they all had a different reason why they suggested against it. So there wasn't one universal reason why you shouldn't make Aliyah. One guy said, you're not going to be able to find a Rav like you have here. Another guy said, your kids are going to go off the derech. Another guy said that you're not going to make parnasa. The guy who says you're not going to make parnasa, he wasn't afraid about schools for his kids. And the guy who was afraid of schools for his kids wasn't afraid about parnasa. He'll take care of parnasa, it'll be okay. So if you look at it the sum picture, there isn't really one reason. It's just everybody has their own personal fears that they reflect, and they don't have to be your fears. One other thing I'd like to mention is that when you're doing your research, when you're speaking to people, and especially when you're speaking to Rabbanim, I personally felt like I was going through Gerus when I was going through the process of Aliyah. Before Aliyah, and even when I was doing my pilot trips, I really felt like I was going through Geras. What do I mean? That just like a ger, they don't a person that says I want to be Jewish, they don't accept him right away. They first tell him, no, what do you want to be Jewish for? It's just that big headache and anti-Semitism and all these restrictions and kosher and Shabbos. What do you need this for? And they push him away and they push him away and they push him away and they push him away. And they really, really, unless the guy really wants to do it, he's going to get discouraged along the way. And I felt like this is kind of the same exact process that I was going through. So realize that it's not, when you get discouraged, when you hear negativity, when you hear people's doubts, don't look at it as that, so let's just give up. Let's not go. There's too many problems. It's that it's like that because the people looking out for you, or Banim, different people you speak to, they don't want you to go into this with rose-colored glasses and think everything's going to be perfect, everything's going to be easy, everything's going to be better and work out perfectly. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be things. There are going to be things that are not going to be easy. You have to be prepared mentally. If you want it, you have to fight for it. And until you're ready to fight for it, if you're not ready to fight for it, you shouldn't go. If you think you're just going to come there and everyone's just going to shower you with positivity and gifts and make everything easy for you, you're going to be setting yourself up for a very difficult time. So that's why don't get discouraged by the negativity. Just realize it's there to really filter out the people that are really there for the right reasons and really motivated from the rest of the people that, just looking into it casually, aren't really motivated, aren't really going to fight for it. So one little story, which many of you may know, there was there's a question. Someone asked the Rebbe, why did Hashem create atheists? So the Rebbe answered, the reason why Hashem created atheists is because one day there's going to be a poor man standing outside of a rich man's house, and he's going to ask him for money. And the rich man is going to say, don't worry, Hashem is going to take care of it. You have no reason to worry. Everything will be okay. So Hashem created atheists to teach that rich man that no, when it comes to mitzvahs, when it comes to helping other people or helping yourself, don't rely on Hashem to do everything for you. You have to take action. You have to do it yourself. That's what Hashem expects of you. That's why Hashem creates atheists, because in certain instances, when we're talking about a mitzvah or helping other people or yourself, you have to pretend that God's not in the picture. You have to take action. You have to do everything that you can to succeed and to do your Shusteris. So the Shusteris when it comes to Aliyah is really investing in research, speaking to people that have succeeded, speaking to people like yourself, speaking that people from your background that have done it, people that share your profession, people that share your hashkafa, speak to people that work in your line of profession, and speak to people about chinuch, figure out which school options make sense, find out about real estate, speak to realtors, speak to people that bought, people that rent, speak to people in different communities. You know what I found was very interesting about Eretz Yisrael? One of the first projects that I did when I started Charedi Aliyah activism was I sent out emails in different groups of looking for volunteers who wants to help future potential Olim, give them advice on different topics and parnasa and schools and communities, etc. I put out a few emails, literally maybe 4 or 5 emails, and my email inbox was packed, nonstop, just like a steady flow of dozens and dozens and dozens of people that wanted to volunteer and help. I was shocked. I mean, imagine in Monsey or Flatbush or Lakewood, someone, in the local newspaper is looking for volunteers to help people who are interested in moving to Lakewood. Who has time to spend a few hours a week helping people adjust to Lakewood? I can't imagine how many people would be interested in helping out on such a venture. And I certainly wasn't used to it coming from Monsey. And here I was just flooded. The bottom line is people here actually want to help. They get excited. When a person makes Aliyah, a person that lives in Eretz Yisrael feels like it's a personal win for themselves. They feel nachas. They want to be part of the Aliyah. They want to be part of their success. So you'd be surprised how many people are willing to give of their time to help you, to guide you, to advise you, to put you in the right direction, to put you right in touch with the right people. I put in an ad before I did my pilot trip. I put in an ad on a job board looking for, I'm an accountant looking for positions in accounting. I received multiple emails from maybe 5 or 6 different emails. I ended up getting 3 interviews from that one email of people that just wanted to help someone who's interested in making Aliyah. People here really do want to help, genuinely. And so taking advantage of it, get connected. I could help you. There are other organizations that help connect you, but seek out help, speak to people. It'll really go a long way. And the best way to really meet people, other than just online and through organizations, is coming on a pilot trip. When you're actually here on the ground, meeting people, talking to people, networking, making connections, that really can go a long way. About the pilot trip.
Can I interrupt you for a sec? Yeah, I'm just wondering, since you mentioned that people really go out of their way to help out, what do you think makes Charedi or religious Aliyah different from the conventional secular route? Or what is the extra value that you can harness by making Aliyah as a Torah Jew?
What's just to clarify your question, is what can you bring to Israel, or what can Israel bring to you as a
No, what are the extra resources or an extra networking, for example, that you can tap into when you make Aliyah, as opposed to, say, the secular route? I mean, what difference does it make that you're a Torah Jew? I mean,
well, I mean, generally, there are. It's, I guess, when people are in touch with people that are from a similar background, it's kind of makes the, I don't know, you feel a little bit close. If people are more similar with you culturally in your background, they kind of relate to you more. They kind of feel like even more of a personal interest in trying to help you out, trying to get you the right connection. And so I think it's very important that when you get help, I mean, get help from anybody you can get help from. If somebody from a different ideology than you is willing to help, take it, and for sure. But it just it's more, I don't know, it's more effective, I feel like, when you speak to people from your background. They understand you more. They understand the issues that you're coming with. They understand, and they're a little bit more motivated to help you more. So I definitely suggest connecting with people that are more similar to you. Speak the same language. So I mean, there's organizations, there's Partners in Aliyah. That's an organization that across the board, not specific to Charedi, that partners people up and gives advice and sets them up with volunteers they're all different, not only Charedi. The organization that I helped start when I started Charedi Aliyah, Nava Kodesh. They have specifically a group of Charedi people helping other Charedi people, because it's just more, it's like Jewish geography. They have similar backgrounds. Maybe they have the same uncle. Maybe they grew up in the same city. It's just more, it's easier when you have someone with a closer background. You kind of want to help them even more. So I hope I answered your question. I don't know if I did.
Thank you. Actually, we had another listener who raised the point that you can't do pilot trips until the epidemic is over. And actually, well, if anything in Israel, it will be the first to pass, because I'm actually going to get my vaccine tomorrow. Hopefully, Israel will be the first COVID country, so that's no excuse for putting off your pilot trip. And then the added comment was that people might not have money for a pilot trip. I would say, I don't know, Avraham, you can support me on that, that with the right planning, the right networking, all you need to save up for is your tickets. The rest you can arrange with hospitality and people helping you out over here, and really do it on a tight budget, at least for the pilot trip.
Right. Yeah, in the meantime, we have at least once a month a Zoom session on a different community, American or Russian community, to explore on Zoom. And there's also an idea to maybe organize a joint trip for Russian American Jews to explore different communities when it's possible, when it's possible to go to Israel. So maybe there is a possibility to save some money on doing a group trip like that. So
you're most welcome, and please do put Haifa on your itinerary.
For sure.
It is a great point though, but the pilot trip, one of my ideas that I had that maybe eventually I'll get to is getting subsidized pilot trips, because I think you're right. It can be an expensive, even for the flights can be, it's expensive. Some people don't have the liberty of going by themselves. They have to bring their whole family. So just the flights alone could be very expensive. So it's something that I would love to do if I had the funding and this to work on getting some sort of subsidized pilot trips. It's a great idea, but we're not there yet. But it's a good point. So back to the pilot trip. So the pilot trip, I would suggest, should be 10 to 14 days minimum, and even better if you could do 2 trips. I'll tell you what I did. I did my first pilot trip in 2012 for about 10 days, and we just spent Shabbos in 2 or 3 different cities that we thought might make sense for us. And then we did a follow-up pilot trip in January 2018, which is 4 months before we made Aliyah. And we looked at once we narrowed down the community that we knew we wanted to live in. So then we spent all that time in that community, going to many different schools, to many different apartments, many different, we spoke to different Rebbeim, Ravs of different shuls, and job interviews. I had 3 job interviews lined up at that point. So yeah, I mean, it's not practical for everybody to do 2 different pilot trips, but at the very least 1 pilot trip to 10 to 14 days, narrowing it down to like 2, maximum 3 communities that might make sense. And hopefully when you come for the 10 days, you'll have 2 Shabboses. So you'll spend Shabbos in 2 different cities, and I guess pick the best, whatever feels the most appropriate. And the pilot trip is a crazy time. The whole day is like packed from morning till night. I mean, we didn't sit down to eat like the whole day. We were busy nonstop for 10 days. From going from interview to interview to interview, to job interview, to school interview, to realtor appointment. And one thing I would say is you don't have to worry about accomplishing everything. After we did our pilot trip, we didn't succeed in getting confirmation that we got accepted to the school that we wanted. We didn't have an apartment, and I don't think I didn't accept any of the job. I did get sort of a semi job offer or 2. So at least I found out what the salary range is, but I didn't come back with anything concrete. But that's okay, because after the pilot trip, now you have all these connections. You could be in touch with the people after the trip and remotely and finalize everything then. I didn't find any apartments, and 2 months after my pilot trip, I finally, through Zoom, got a realtor that found an apartment for me, and I signed a contract remotely. So yeah, you don't need to have the pressure that you need to solve all your problems on the pilot trip, but at least get as much information as possible, make as many connections as possible, and use that as the basis of doing further research, further planning once you get back. And as I said, don't worry about the schools not accepting you. Some of the schools will accept you right away. Just fill out an application and good to go. The schools that are more difficult to get into will want to see the kid. They'll say, once you come, then come for an interview. And it's kind of crazy because, it's like you're already in Israel, you already made Aliyah, it's too late. What if they don't accept you? School's starting in a week, but that's just the way it is. Things are, kind of like high pressure last minute. It's kind of part of the culture. So, but don't worry about it. It'll work out at the end. You'll get a school. I've heard many people that things just like fell into place, like literally last minute. That's just how it works. And one other thing is when you go on this pilot trip and you see their apartments, you see the different neighborhoods, you meet the different schools, definitely after you do that, speak to the rabbi, like 2 or 3 rabbis that people recommended of the community, and run through your different concerns, run through which neighborhood you think is appropriate, which school you think is appropriate. Because a lot of times I came in with a certain impression. Me and my wife thought, this school is definitely for us. This is the perfect school. This is exactly like what we had in the States. And we went to the rabbi and he said, do not go there under any circumstances. This is not the school you want to go to. And it doesn't matter what the school was, but the bottom line is that things can seem a certain way when you're there very quickly for an interview. you really need to speak to somebody that's been on the ground, that knows the situation, that knows you a little bit and can give you real advice. So definitely, when you come on the pilot trip, make sure towards the end to speak to Rav to kind of summarize your experiences, see what they have to say, and then based on that conversation, it'll help you make your decision. And also, you'll hopefully find the Rav that you want to be your Rav once you get here. Purchasing or renting, I don't know, it's a difficult topic. You know, in the past, they said it always makes sense to rent right away when you get here, so you figure out what you like, what you don't like, and make your decision a year later. The prices are going up, the dollar is going down. You know, when Americans start making more and more Aliyah, which they will be, the prices are going to go up even more. So I don't know what to tell you. If you feel super confident after your pilot trip or pilot trips, you know, I would suggest maybe buying right away as opposed to renting, but it's something I can't decide for you. Renting is different. You have to be prepared for renting in Israel. If you decide to go renting, it can be a headache, but you just have to be prepared. If you're prepared for the headache, it's a much smaller headache. But what you have to prepare for is, number one, in the real estate, in rentals, rentals are a lot fewer in Israel than in America, so it's less of a thing here. And there's less trust between landlord and tenant. They require larger deposits, multiple guarantors, that if something happens, that someone else is going to be on the hook, and you have to repaint after you leave. Even if you live there for a year, it's your responsibility to repaint the rental. And also, because there's such a short supply of rentals, they go very quickly. So you could be in contract negotiations for a rental, and then in the middle of the negotiations, they tell you, oh, it's already been taken. It goes very, very quick, and whoever is literally the first person to sign on the contract, that's who gets the rental. So it can be very nerve-wracking. So, you know, have a lawyer that you find somewhere here to kind of look at the review of the contract and advise you to make sure it's a fair contract. And I just suggest don't drag your feet. I had that problem in the beginning when I did the rental. I dragged my feet on a contract, and it ended up going to somebody else. It was very frustrating. Had I known that things move much quicker here than in the States, I would have probably just taken it right away and not dragged my feet. But, you know, I learned the lesson. The other thing is, one thing that, interestingly, that a lot of Americans feel they need, and I think it's a misconception, they feel that if they're going to move to Israel, they need a house. They have a house in Passaic, they have a house in Monsey, you know, in Lakewood they have a house. Having a house is a normal thing in the States. Doesn't mean you're rich, doesn't mean you're a big fancy person. Having a house is kind of like a normal thing in America. In Israel, most people have apartments. Some people have these condominiums, which they call cottages, and very few people have, depending on which part of the country, but having a standalone house, especially in the center of the country, Yerushalayim, Beit Shemesh, these types of places, it's very expensive, very, very expensive. Much more expensive than in the States. So don't come in with the preconceived notion that you had a house, you need to have a house. The standards here are different. You don't need to, you could feel totally normal. Everyone here has an apartment. You don't need to worry, you know, how can I live in an apartment? I had a house. How can I go to the, I did it. I had a house in Monsey. I moved to an apartment. It worked out okay. I mean, do I wish I had more space? Yeah, I definitely wish I had more space, but I don't feel any pressure because everyone around me has apartments. I feel totally normal, part of society. It's so there's no pressure to get something that I can't afford. And there's a huge selection, very beautiful apartments, stunning views, and you know, and gardens and penthouse and all these different things. Don't get stuck on having a standalone house. I hear a lot of people getting stuck on this and just not. It's not the right perspective. You just need to come in. Anyway. I've said enough.
Can I chime in here on rentals? I think, speaking for Haifa, I think the balance here is certainly the other way around. There is much more property for rent than for sale, and it really depends what you're looking for, what size apartment is after. But I agree with you that the apartments are far more prevalent than houses. But also, as far as contracts go for rental, there's been, I think, a sea change in that people used to use standard templates, contracts that were photocopied year from year on, that did have these clauses whereby you undertake to repaint the apartment at the end of the rental. And nowadays they're getting replaced with more modern terms where the standard conditions are wear and tear. You can negotiate your way out of having to repaint the apartment or taking on unreasonable obligations. So this is, I think there have been changes here over the past couple of years, certainly for the better. So don't be intimidated.
Yeah, and I guess it also probably would depend on areas, and some areas have more progressive policies, some less. Depends on where you live. So could well be, yeah. Haifa's could be different than Beit Shemesh, but yeah, I guess it depends on the locale. Okay, schools. So when you come on your pilot trip, you're going to see, at least I saw, that all the schools look the same. I'm saying not all the schools, but we were looking at schools on the Charedi spectrum. So American Charedi, a little bit more to the Israeli side, but basically American. There's different types of Charedi. We can discuss that a little bit later about Israeli Charedi, American Charedi. But bottom line is we were looking at the Charedi spectrum, and all the schools look the same. So the schools that were like all the way to the right and all the way to the left, the kids look the same, they dress the same, the Rebbe's look the same, they were learning the same things. So I couldn't understand what is the difference. How do you figure out what school makes sense for my family? And so just to break it down, Israeli Haredi schools, the typical Israeli Haredi schools have much stronger focus on the Limudei Kodesh and can range between 40 minutes a day to 2 hours a day of secular subjects. That's up until 8th grade. The more American style schools, which they have several of them in Ramat Beit Shemesh, it's very similar to the American Monsey Pesach model, which is half a day Kodesh, half a day Chol. Those are the more American schools. But the thing is that even if you decide to send to an Israeli Haredi school, which has limited amount of secular subjects, there are ways to supplement it. There's tutors, additional tutors for reading. My kids have English reading tutors, math tutors, different types of tutors that you can pay privately. And by the way, keep that one thing in mind is when you do your budgeting, that's something you have to take into account. If your kids need tutors, it costs money for the tutors, even though school is very cheap in Israel, but you might need tutors, and it is an expense they have to take into account. But there's tutors that are available. There's chugs. A chug is like an after-school club where they have several kids that are doing an activity. There's science chugs. There's karate chugs. There's forest, like surviving in the forest chugs. There's all these different types of bike riding chugs, mountain biking. So there's all sorts of activities here. I found much more than even where I was from in Monsey. It's very kid oriented, kid friendly. There's a million activities. There's so but anyway, back to the original topic. In terms of the curriculum, so yes, if secular studies is important to you, the American Haredi schools that exist in Ramat Beit Shemesh definitely provide that. But even if you want to send to a more Israeli Haredi school, you do have options to supplement, and many people do that. Another differentiating factor between the more Israeli Haredi schools and American Haredi schools, at least in Beit Shemesh, is the parent body. So the kids look the same, but who are the parents? What type are they? Where are they from? What do they like? It's kind of like a sensitive topic. I don't want to use too many words. I don't want to offend anybody. There's all different types of people that along the Haredi spectrum that are thriving here, and you just have to find what's right for you and what you feel most comfortable with. But I would say to break it down, the schools that are on the more American side, well, I'll say the other way around. The schools that are on the more Israeli Haredi side, those families, you would say, are simpler lifestyle, simpler spending habits, simpler in terms of material things, a little bit simpler, less exposure to media, less exposure to movies, less exposure, still some exposure, but less so. And the schools that are more American are more American. They're closer to the American lifestyle, closer to American spending habits. You know, the parents might be working in America and flying back and forth, or sending the kids to the grandparents in America for the summers, and maintaining an American lifestyle but living in Israel. If that's kind of where you feel like you fit in more, so there's schools like that. Schools that are more Israeli Haredi, less so. It's more simpler, less exposed. So that's another thing, the parent body. And one other thing is, just so people understand, is that even if you're sent to an American style school, the most American, all the instruction is in Hebrew. So your kids are going to be speaking Hebrew. And by the way, we're talking depending on the school, but your kids could end up picking, and depending on their age, but my kids ended up picking up Hebrew within 4 to 6 months. They're already speaking fluent Hebrew. It happens super, super quickly. The younger, the quicker. Even the older kids, they'll learn it, but it'll take a little bit more time. But my kids were, 3rd grade, 4th grade. They picked it up in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Each one slightly shorter, slightly longer. But all the schools, even the American schools, are in Hebrew. The difference is that during recess, or they play with kids that speak English at home, or not. But the bottom line is that the instruction is in Hebrew.
Quick
Another
question.
thing is Sure.
Quick question. You mentioned previously in our conversations that you might have some sort of a database for different American Haredi schools. Does this database have the amount of secular education listed, and if the school provides root or other options that are of interest to the American Haredi population?
The database contains the contact information from families that send to different schools. So if you wanted that information, you could contact them and get that from them directly. I would just say one point just to consider: if you are American Haredi, or feel like you fit somewhere into that spectrum, there are basically, how shall I put it? There's 2 aspects to when someone says they're a more American, like they want American style chinuch. There's 2 components to that. One component is social, and the other is academic. So what I mean by that is, being an American style school could mean that the kids there are from American families, their parents are from America, they immigrated themselves from America, they speak English at home, they have the American culture. So that's social. But the other aspect that's American is the American style emphasis on stronger limudei chol, secular studies. So if you're looking for a place that has both American kids, like where your kids will feel comfortable, they move in and they could pretty much speak to half the class in English, maybe not during class, but outside of class, and if you're looking for that, and you're looking for like the American style of chinuch, that strong emphasis on chol and kodesh, your options are extremely limited. You're basically talking about mostly Ramat Beit Shemesh. Now, there are many different communities, and we'll discuss some of them out there, that have American style chinuch from the academic perspective, that they have strong kodesh, strong chol, split 50-50. There's schools called Charedi Mamlachti. So they're Charedi, but they're also government sponsored. So the government sets the curriculum of certain. So they get the bagruyot, and they get the minimum, at least they get the the maths and the English and the sciences and all that. So you have those schools. You have towns, communities that have these types of Charedi government schools, like Carmiel, like Rehovot, Hashmonaim. Those are some, but those are not American in the sense of social. They're not, you're not going to have, every other kid speaking English or from an American family. They're going to be Israeli. And the Americans are going to be the extreme minority. In Beit Shemesh, your kids are going to be the majority in the fact that they're from America and speak English. So that's something to take into account when you're considering schools, when you come on your pilot trip. Finances, I'll try to run through this quickly. Really try to make connections before you go on your pilot trip. Online, you can contact, if you want to find people in a similar profession, you can contact me. There are other organizations that do similar things. We'll go through some of them at the end. On Facebook, there's the Facebook groups. If you go to Facebook groups of these cities, like Ramat Beit Shemesh is a city that you might look into, or Carmiel is a city you might look into, or Rehovot is a city you look into. Go join the Facebook group, join the WhatsApp group, join the Yahoo groups for those cities, and say, hey, I'm looking to make Aliyah. I'm a nurse, or I'm I'm an architect. Does anybody here have any connections in architect or nurse? And you'd be surprised how many people respond to you. And make your connections, and then plan so when you come for your pilot trip, that try to get an interview for when you're here. You'd be surprised how easy it is. It's not out of reach. That's exactly what I did. I just put out anonymous postings online, and many people got back to me, and I got 3 interviews out of those. I don't know how many emails I got, 6, 7 emails, and out of those 3 interviews came out of it. So really put some effort into doing that. Also, when you speak to people in the similar professions, find out if there's something that's more relevant here than in America. For example, I'm an accountant, so there's different areas of accounting. There's tax accounting, there's private accounting, there's forensic accounting. There's different accountings. In Israel, happens to be the tax accounting, for whatever reason, is very big for American accountants. Knowing tax is important. So when you do that kind of research, so in Israel, this specific type of accounting is important. So put some effort into maybe refreshing your knowledge or taking an additional course or whatever it is, so you're just a little bit more prepared. Not everything that you do in the States is going to be, exactly equivalent to here. You might have to adjust a little bit of your, brush up on your skills and etc. Don't be shocked by the low salaries. A lot of the salaries here are low for employees. Now, if you're running your own business, that's a separate story. Or if you're in one of the professions I'll mention later, if you're in IT, high tech, anything IT related, high tech related, real estate, construction, if you're running your own business, the sky is the limit in terms of salary, in terms of how much income you can make here. People can do better here than in the States. If you're an employee from just not one of these industries, you can still make a decent living, but you're not going to make as much as you did in the States, most likely. So you just have to be prepared for that. You should try, if you can, to find an opportunity, maybe in the current job that you have now, see if there's any possibilities of continuing remote. Corona did this amazing thing, despite all the terrible things that it did, but it allowed for people to start working remotely. Everybody's working remotely now. So if you ask your boss to, can I continue on remotely? It's not so far-fetched. A year ago, it would have been far-fetched. Like, why should I let you work remotely? But now everybody's doing it. So there's more of a possibility. So if you're able to maintain what you currently have, maintain it. But still, you should still come on your pilot trip, assume that it's not going to work out with your current, do the interviews, find out what the salaries are, and prepare to get a job here. But you should still, at the same time, simultaneously try to maintain whatever you have in the States, or potentially look for other opportunities in the States that will allow you to work remotely and move here and earn an American salary. So be prepared that the Israeli salary is lower, but the expenses here are a lot lower. The 3 areas that are the biggest discount for people here in terms of expenses are tuition, school tuition, yeshiva tuition. Here, a boys' cheder, I'm talking from my personal experience. My boys' cheder costs $130 a month. Girls Beis Yaakov $300 a year. My property taxes on my apartment in Beit Shemesh are 80% cheaper than what they were in Monsey. and health insurance, $30 a month. And Monsey, I think I was paying, I don't even remember, was it $800 a month, 1,000 I was paying, and here's $30 a month per person. So, those are three areas that it gets close to balancing out. I can't say exactly, you have to do your own budget, your own calculations, but salaries are lower, expenses are a lot lower in those three areas. And one other point I'd like to make is that when you do, you definitely try to make a budget, figure out how much money you can make. Like when you do your research and find out let's say you're an accountant, you find out what an average accountant salary is, and your wife is a nurse, you find out what the average nurse salary is, you add that together, you figure that, you could probably get a job based on the people you spoke to, there's a need. So that's the basis of your budget. And then you go through all of your expenses. Most things are going to be the same in America as in Israel, except for the three that I just mentioned. And those are going to be cheaper in Israel. And what's going to be more expensive is your apartment, house is usually more expensive, and your car. Car is extremely expensive here. The car costs twice as much as in the States. The gas costs twice as much. The insurance costs twice as much. So everybody has it for some reason. I'm shocked. Israelis it's normal to have a car, but to me it's like shocking because it's so expensive. I don't have a car yet because I refuse to pay such a crazy amount for a car, but people do it. But the bottom line is when you make your budget and you count all these different things, don't be stricter on yourself than you are in the States. So for example, when I was in the States, I never met my budget. My expenses were always higher than my income. Every month it was red. Every month was in the red, but I survived and I wasn't suffering. And it was in the red this month, that month, the other month. Then all of a sudden I get a tax return and back up or whatever, and that's how you live. You get a little bit of credit card debt, eventually pay it off. So if I did all my expenses on paper in America, then I would think, oh man, I can't survive in America because my expenses are higher than my income. So I can't survive. But I survived, and many people survive. So when you count your budget, you should be realistic. You should take everything into account, but don't be stricter on yourself than you are in the States. Like if your budget in the States doesn't make sense, so don't say, oh, I can't make Aliyah because my budget in Israel doesn't make sense. Yeah, plus or minus, as long as it's close. I think you should feel comfortable.
Sorry, can I chime in on the financial issue? I think I fully agree with the point that you raised, that the three areas that are a lot cheaper here in Israel than in the West, be it US or UK, and the one thing that is more expensive, but not that much more expensive, is shopping. Because your grocery bill will be probably higher than what you used to pay back home, as well as electronics and other commodities. But I just got a question on health insurance. Somebody asked if health insurance isn't a double or even triple if you get supplemental coverage, which most people do. Well, I have to make a differentiation here. You can get additional coverage from your health fund, which is something that's known as Kupat Olim here. That is, basically state-provided healthcare. You can go for more advanced level of care, which can probably take your premium to double, not triple. But in addition to that, you can take out private insurance, which will give you extra cover on disability, or should you become dependent, they will provide a nurse. Eventualities like this, which can be very much more expensive, but with basic access to healthcare, and not a bad one at that, you're quite okay with your Kupat Cholim, with your health fund provider. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So the next thing I'd like to discuss is setting the stage. So you did the pilot trip, you did the research. Now you need to prepare. You need to prepare your family. I would say a good piece of advice is, back up a second. Most spouses are not exactly on the same wavelength that I've spoken to. So usually there's one person that's more motivated to make Aliyah, one person a little bit less motivated. It's not always the same. That's not a reason not to come. But you need, if you're the more motivated one, then it's your responsibility, or it'll help you tremendously if you get the other one on board. You have to make them part of you have to get their input. You have to make them part of the decision-making process. When I was making Aliyah, I would be happy to move anywhere in Israel, and the more Israeli, the better. My wife, she wouldn't hear of it. She only wanted the most American city possible. She wanted to feel comfortable. She was afraid of Hebrew. She would only move on the condition that she got to be in the most American place where she would feel comfortable. And so we ended up going to Ramat Beit Shemesh. So, you know, I definitely think whatever you can to kind of give your spouse the feeling like they're also in control, and they could also make decisions. They could, you know, do what's good for them. I think that would go a long way in getting them on board, which is critical, because when you get here, it's when there are challenges that you're going to be facing, having someone to help you, having someone who's on your team and who's fighting it together with you, makes it so much easier than coming with a spouse who wasn't really motivated to begin with, and now they have to deal with this difficulty and that thing and that challenge. And now not only are you dealing with the challenge, but now you're dealing with your spouse. So really getting your spouse on board is critical. Anything you could do to get them on board by making them part of the process and giving them decision-making power, it'll help you, it'll get you far. Children as well. Children, you really need to get them involved as much as possible. They also need to be on board. If they come here and they're depressed, they don't really want to be here, you're going to make things difficult for yourself. So, you know, raise the spirit in your house. You know, whether it's Shabbos stories about Eretz Yisrael, whether it's songs, Israeli songs, getting pictures of Eretz Yisrael in your house, maps, posters, Israeli food, whatever it is, get the spirit going, to get them excited. When you show that you're excited, when you're enthusiastic, your kids will be enthusiastic. And then when you get here, it'll be a whole different experience. When your kids are really into it and they're happy, that's what's going to define your happiness as well. Language, I would suggest. I mean, I did Ulpan before when I was a student, so I knew a little bit of Hebrew. I did know basic Hebrew, conversational Hebrew. I was okay, conversational Hebrew. My wife wasn't at all. She came with 0, and we were okay. We were, in terms of language, we were okay. Like, my parents, they made Aliyah also a few months after we did. Neither of them had Hebrew at all, and they had a much more difficult time, even though their life was much more set up for them. They didn't have to get jobs, they didn't have to take care of the kids, they didn't have school, nothing. All they had to do was just come and live. But it was much harder for them because neither of them had Hebrew. So I would strongly suggest at least one of the spouses should have at least a basic level of Hebrew. And there's many online Ulpans that are available that you could Google online, Ulpan Hebrew. They're not so expensive. You know, while you're waiting for your paperwork to process, definitely I would suggest investing in that. And I would just say one thing is that Russians in Israel, they all speak Hebrew. I mean, with a nice thick Russian accent, but they all speak Hebrew well. They learn it. They take the time because they can't survive on Russian alone. Americans are spoiled. They think, I'm American. I speak English. I'll get by. I don't need to learn Hebrew. And so Americans end up learning Hebrew a lot less. There's a lot more Americans that don't know Hebrew at all than there are Russians that don't know Hebrew at all. American Russians, I don't know. I don't know what you know. Are you guys more Russian or are you more American? Hopefully you'll be more Russian in that way and pick up the Hebrew. It'll help you a lot. You don't need to worry about your kids. Your kids will pick it up, as I said, very quickly. You'll be shocked how quickly they pick it up. The problem is you, the adults. The adults take some longer, so you really need to invest in that. Picking the right community.
Sorry, can I chime in with a comment here? I think learning Hebrew in advance goes just as well for teenagers. So that's a very difficult age for them to make a complete break from their friends and environment. And if with younger kids, indeed, they can within just a couple of months they can feel almost at home in their new Israeli environment. Teenagers do take a lot longer. So if you could get them hooked on online or Hebrew classes, that would you would do them a great service. Also, I think I want to take issue with only Americans, creating a bubble in Ramat Beit Shemesh and speaking English. The same thing happens with Russians, especially in Carmiel, and I know of parts of Haifa where you will hardly hear any Hebrew, Russian only. So, but I think that we all agree that this is a situation you want to avoid, because if you the faster you expose, the more you expose yourself to the Hebrew-speaking environment, the faster you will integrate and remove the barriers. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now the big question: how do you pick the right community? It could get overwhelming. There's so many different cities, so many towns, kibbutzim and moshavim and cities and big cities. How do you pick what's the right city? So there's a lot of different important factors: affordability, chinuch for the children, accessibility to jobs, transportation, the right neighbors, the right community, the right rav, the right housing. For all you Russians, proximity to the sea. You have to decide what's the most important for you. You will not get maybe I'm wrong, but my guess is you will not get everything. There's some things you'll have to sacrifice. So I would suggest picking the top two things. What are the top two priorities that you have? For most people, school-age children, it's chinuch is like the top priority. And so then your search should be based on what communities would give me the best possible chinuch. Or if your priority is whatever, finding the right community, finding the right neighbors where you feel like you would fit in, or whatever it is. So that's how you base your search, not based on everything. Just take the top two. What's the next? Okay, so the choices you're going to need to make when you're considering which community is, you have to decide for yourself. Do you want to go on a fast track Israeli integration? Are you ready to go full force into in the Israeli Charedi system and all that entails, and all the differences culturally, which we can discuss if we have some more time, that entails? Or do you prefer a softer, more comfortable landing, but the cost of that is a slower integration? You're going to have to decide that for yourself. Ramat Beit Shemesh, which is the soft, I guess, known as for American Haredim, like the softest landing, most comfortable, the bubble. Is that what you feel like is the most suitable, or do you feel like there's many communities that have Americans in them, that have an American shul, have many Americans that live there, that are Haredi, but they're basically absorbed within the Israeli Kehillah. They're not their own bubble. They don't have their own schools. They don't have their own infrastructure. They might have a shul, but maybe not even. There are many cities like this that have American Kehillahs, that have American communities, but they're for people that want to integrate. So some of the people that I can imagine succeeding in these types of places are people that are, let's say, learning in Eretz Yisrael. A young couple is learning in Eretz Yisrael after they get married, and they decide to stay on. And they don't need the bubble. So they want to go Israeli. They want their kids to be Israeli. They want to fit in. So that makes sense. Or if you're a family that is that could fit into the Israeli Haredi system. In other words, the Israeli Haredi emphasis on more Kodesh and less Chol and less Gashmias and this. If you feel like you're that type of person, like a Lakewood learning type of person, it also might make sense for you to look into you don't need the American bubble. So those are things you need to consider. Another thing choice you're going to need to make is in town versus out of town. Just like in America, you have in town and out of town. In Israel, it's the same thing. In town is the center of the country. So basically between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, everything in between roughly, that's considered in town. It's a center. It has all the amenities. It has all the conveniences of being in the center. It has all the Americans. That are many American communities there. Or do you want out of town? And out of town, just like in America, out of town places, the atmosphere is different. The community is stronger. There's less conveniences in many of these places, but you could buy a bigger house, or you could buy a bigger property. You know, in an in-town type of place, when you move in, nobody even knows that you moved in. You know, maybe somebody brings you a kugel, but basically, you know, you live and you mind your own business and you live your own life. That's in town. Out of town, you make a difference. People notice you. So on the one hand, it's warmer and it's more of a community feel. Many out of town places, but for people that like their own privacy, maybe it's not the right choice for them. So you have to kind of decide what you want to do. So you're going to have to make that decision: in town, out of town, city life versus suburban. Now you have some places that it's not exactly the same thing as the previous one, because you have some places that are city life, so to speak, but they're out of the center of the country. They're maybe in the north, maybe in the south. So you have a city, but it's kind of out of town because it's or suburban. And also another thing you have to consider is there's certain places that are exclusively Charedi and certain places that are mixed, Charedi, Dati Leumi. So you have to decide what you want. Do you want all different types of people, more religious than you, less religious than you like the diversity, or you want to be in an insulated kind of environment where certain types of families, certain types of influences, you don't want. You have to decide what you fit in better with. That's a decision you're going to have to make, and based on those things, you'll be able to decide what community makes sense for you. Now, I'll just quickly run through Ramat Beit Shemesh. This is probably the most popular place for American Charedi because it's the softest landing, but at the cost of slow integration. They have the largest and most established American Charedi community, dozens of schools, dozens of shuls, shiurim in English all throughout the day, mikvahs, stores, banks, clinics, everything. There are Russians here. I hear Russian pretty frequently, but there's no established Russian kahila here. English is everywhere. You're still going to need Hebrew because when you go to the bank and you go to the bituach leumi and certain bureaucracy, you're still going to need the Hebrew. But on a social level, when you go to the store, when you go to your shul, when you're on the street, in the park, English is everywhere. There's a high percentage of Balei Tshuva and out-of-town Charedim in Ramat Beit Shemesh. Location-wise, it's 35 minutes from Yerushalayim. It's train to Tel Aviv is an hour away. And there's several new neighborhoods. Ramat Beit Shemesh is literally expanding. Originally it was an old Beit Shemesh, which is more or less like a Sephardi, not really religious, but like traditional neighborhood. And then that was the original neighborhood, Beit Shemesh. And then there are all these little suburbs around it. Ramat Beit Shemesh Bet is a Israeli Haredi, like Hasidic suburb. Then you have Aleph, which is like American Haredi. That's like the bubble. Aleph is like the biggest American section. And then you have Gimel, which has Gimel Shtayim, Gimel Achad. Gimel Shtayim, a lot of Americans are moving there from Aleph. Nice new apartments there, all this new construction, all these new stores being built over there. So that's a popular place people are moving to. Aleph is, let's say, 60% American, 40% Israeli. In Gimel, it's probably the reverse, 40 to 60. And then there's Daled, which is a brand new neighborhood, which is bigger than all the other neighborhoods combined. It's all in construction. It just barely started. People started moving in, but it's going to be built over the next 18 months to 3 years. So there's a lot of new developments going on over there. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but I would imagine it would be similar to Aleph and Gimel, mix of Israelis and Americans, Haredi. Now, in terms of price, I just give you a sample. 4-bedroom apartment in Ramat Beit Shemesh is now, with an exchange rate that keeps dropping, you're in the range of $600,000 to $700,000 for a 4-bedroom apartment. Now, obviously, it depends on the condition. If it's terrible condition and small, it could be less than $600,000. If it's amazing condition and huge, then this 4-bedroom could be more than $700,000. But this is just a ballpark. So bottom line, Ramat Beit Shemesh is the softest landing. It's not the most affordable because it's in the center, because it's American. It's on the more expensive side, but beautiful place, beautiful views. It's in the mountains. It's the fastest growing city in Israel at the moment. So that's Ramat Beit Shemesh. Now, there's a bunch of other cities that are like fast track Israeli integration. They have American communities there. They have Americans living there that kind of are part of the overall Israeli Haredi community. and many places that are very similar price, similar types of people that live there, similar in the fact that you're going to have to integrate to the Israeli system, and some of these places are Neve Yaakov, Ramot Bet, Harnov, Telstone, Beitar, Givat Zev, Modin Alit, Tel Zion. These are all places that are around Yerushalayim, that all cost about the same as Beit Shemesh, but they're not an American bubble. They have Americans living there. They have communities of Americans, but it's not a bubble. They're Americans there integrate into Israeli. And so if you're coming with school-age children or children that you feel are at risk, that you want them to be super comfortable and super feel at home with kids that speak English and this and that. So my personal suggestion would be strongly to look into Ramat Beit Shemesh. If you have very young kids, or you're very stark liquid family, you don't need an American bubble. So then definitely look into one of these cities. But again, this is my personal opinion. You could ask other people, see what they say. That's a personal impression that I got. This is just a picture of one of these cities, Tel Zion. They all look the same. If you go to these cities, they all look the same. Big white buildings, big apartments, parks everywhere. This is like a standard view of one of these cities that I just mentioned. Tel Zion is one of them. Okay, out-of-town options. So I don't want to take too much of the time, because you probably have presentations that are tailor-made for each individual city, and I don't know all these places very in depth. I'll just give just a superficial, quick, brief overview. Rehovot is a place, I think you already had a presentation on it, but it's considered like out of town. It has an American Charedi community, and the prices are similar to Beit Shemesh. It's 45 minutes away from Beit Shemesh. It's also considered the center of the country, pretty much. Has one Haredi school that has half English, half secular, half Kodesh. But Haredi, it's warm, it's welcoming. It's for the type of people that want to be, I guess, in the center of the country, but have an out-of-town feel. That's the impression that I have from Rehovot. Carmiel is in the north of the country. It's like 2 hours away from Yerushalayim. It has it's like a larger city that's established, that has a lot, stores and malls and parks. It's a beautiful city. It's like an upper middle class type of Israeli, not religious city that has a cluster of Haredim living there. So they have like 300 Haredi families living amongst an overall, I guess, secular, traditional Israeli city. And out of those 300, maybe 25 are Anglos or Americans, American Haredim. But again, it's integration. It's not a bubble. It's not multiple American Mostos. It's not English everywhere. It's Hebrew. It's integration. It's becoming Israeli, but wanting out of town, wanting more affordable, more community feel, warmer feel, but integrating into the Israeli system. The prices there are much cheaper. They were talking about there you can get a house. This is one of the places where if you're dead set on getting a house, I would look into this. It's you can get your own standalone house for $575,000 or 1.8 million shekel in a place like Carmiel. 4-bedroom apartment is around $320,000. It's close. It's pretty close to Haifa, somewhere between Haifa and Tzfat. But again, if it's Haifa is a big city, but it doesn't compare to Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv. So if you feel the need that you need to be close to the center with all the majority of the jobs, so you have to think about that factor. But it's still close. Haifa is a pretty big city. Emmanuel is like north center. It's not really the north, but it's not the center either. It's somewhere in the middle. That's out of town Hasidish type of place, mostly Hasidish, Sephardi and Hasidish. Very affordable, an hour and a half from Yerushalayim. They have some Americans living there, but also integration. If you can't afford the center, I might suggest it. If you're Hasidish, I definitely suggest it. There are Litvish also, but they're very small, maybe 10 families, 12 families, mostly Hasidish, Sephardi, but it does have some Anglo families there. This is a picture of Carmiel. This is the shul in Carmiel. I don't know. I got the impression when I walked into Carmiel in the shul, it seemed like a Passaic type of community to me. You know, mixed the colored shirts, white shirts, different, more Haredi, a little less Haredi, but like a warm type of, type of feel. That was my personal impression. Now there's another category of communities that are affordable, that are out of town, but are also close to the center. So they offer a lot: affordable, out of town, warm feel, close to all the job, 20 to 40 minutes to Yerushalayim, and so I would definitely suggest looking into these communities. There's Ma'ale Amos, which was originally founded as an American and Russian Balei Tshuva settlement. It changed over the years. It was small for a long time. It was small, but it's been growing rapidly lately. A lot of young Israeli Haredi families moved in. Some Hasidic families moved in. It's growing very quickly. They have new projects that are on the horizon that they're building over there. Very affordable. It's about half the price of Beit Shemesh. You could probably get your own house there for much cheaper than an apartment in Beit Shemesh. They have a very strong Rav there who has a very strong, charismatic, caring Rav. If you feel like you need to have a strong Rav, I would definitely suggest checking out this community. Ma'ale Amos, you have Meitzad, which is near Ma'ale Amos, a few minutes away. It's a small, tiny, young Haredi community. It's on the countryside, beautiful, gorgeous views on the mountains, very affordable, but very young. It's just kind of like a startup. There's still a lot of caravans there and stuff like that. You have Adam, which is right outside of Yerushalayim. It's just a few minutes north of a suburb of Neve Yaakov, northern suburb of Yerushalayim. So eventually they're actually planning, I heard they're planning to connect Adam to Yerushalayim, and at some point it's going to hopefully become part of the municipality, but for now it's considered a separate city, separate community. There it's 10,000 people. It's a very large community with a small segment of Haredim that are growing. The Haredim are starting to move in, but most of the community is secular. Beautiful, gorgeous views there, and you could much cheaper housing, but that's Adam. Ganei Modi'in is a community right adjacent to Hashmonaim, which is across the street from Kiryat Sefer, Modi'in Elit, a few minutes drive from Modi'in. That's kind of more of a mixed, I would say mixed Haredi and Dati Leumi. They have some Haredi families there, some Dati Leumi families there. They have a Haredi school there that caters towards, they have some American families there. I think some 20-25% of the community is American, Anglo. But again, it's integration. It's, if you want to be part of the Israeli system, they have a school there that's part of the half a day, similar, like half a day Kodesh, half a day Chol. It's the Charedi Mamlechti school. They have nice housing over there. It's beautiful housing, and it's close to Modin and Modi'in Elit, and only 30 minutes from Yerushalayim. So the location is great. The housing, there's a lot of housing opportunities there, and it's if you like the idea of being in like a Haredi community, but also has the Tilumi not far, and you like the nice housing and the beautiful views, it's something to definitely consider. And I would say overall, to summarize, these places that I mentioned, they're in Binyamin and Gush Etzion. These are two regions. Binyamin is the northern Jerusalem suburbs. Gush Etzion is like southern Jerusalem suburbs. In my opinion, these are the most scenic, the most beautiful places in all of Israel. They have a community feel, and they're the best prices, and there you really want it. Most places you move in, they notice you, they don't notice you. When you go to one of these smaller places, these smaller communities, they actually want Olim. They want people to move there, and they're excited, and you're part of it, and you're contributing, and you're noticed. So I'm very excited about the potential for American Torah Aliyah to these places, Binyamin, Gush Etzion. This is a picture of Ma'ale Amos. You can see the desert mountains in the background. Okay, so you figured out the community, you did your pilot trip, you prepared your family. Now it's time to speak to your Rav. I would suggest doing this when you already have your research. You've done your research, you looked into the schools, Parnasa, everything. Then you go to your Rav. Going to your Rav before you have any facts, before you have any information, before you have a plan. Well, this is what I did in Monsey. I spoke to several people and several Rebbeim, and one of them was positive. Most of them were negative or parev, or pushed me off, or they kind of skeptical. When I came to there's a story when a big Rav that I respect very much, I started talking to him about Aliyah about a year before I made Aliyah, and every time I spoke to him, he kind of pushed me off. He kind of I got the sense he didn't really want to talk about it with me. And then finally I came to him and I said, listen, I'm moving in 2 weeks. And so he asked me, wait, what are you doing about what's going to be with Parnasa? What's going to be with the schools? What's going to be with your wife and this? And aren't you with your grandmother? What's she going to do? And your kids? And so I gave him an answer for everything. I already had a plan. I told him, I'm moving. I have a plan. This is my plan. And he said, I'm really jealous of you. And I was totally shocked. I couldn't believe it, because when I had spoken to him originally about it, he was skeptical. He was very skeptical all along the way. He didn't really want to talk about it, or he said, well, you got to figure out your parnasa. You can't just go. And that was how our conversation would end. What are you going to do? And so when I finally came to him and I came with the answers that I was able to produce through the research and through the pilot trips, it was a totally different response. I was shocked. He said, I'm jealous of you. I wish I could go. And I heard the same story from other people as well, that they came to the Rav and the Rav was skeptical and he wasn't this. And then they came to him and said, I've made a decision. Here's the research that I've done. Here's the schools. Here's this. And it was a totally different, and all of a sudden the Rav supported them. I think the reason is because nobody wants to take responsibility for your life. Making Aliyah, like any other major life decision, is a big deal. There's going to be challenges. It's not all going to be easy. It's an amazing. It's an amazing thing. It's your life is going to go up. The quality of your life is going to go up tremendously. But there's going to be challenges. There's going to be difficulties, and nobody wants to take that achrayus, that responsibility. And say, oh yeah, you can go. Everything will work out. Everything is going to be perfect. What if it doesn't? What if you have challenges? What if things don't go the way you expected? So you're going to blame the rabbi? No one wants to take that responsibility. So you have to realize that if someone's negative to you or skeptical, it's not because they don't want to do it themselves. It's not because they disagree with you. They don't want to take responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your decisions, and you should definitely seek advice. Definitely seek guidance. But just the ikar is, don't get discouraged by skepticism. Do your homework, come with the research, come prepared, and see what they have to say once you're prepared. And I think it'll be a totally different story than if you come to them without any preparation, without any research, without anything. You just say, can you give me a bracha to go to Israel? I mean, who wants to take that kind of responsibility upon themselves? Definitely, I would suggest speaking to them and asking them if you should go to a gadol for a bracha. I did. I went to Chaim Kanievsky, and he told me, Tavo le'eretz Yisrael, told me, and I took what he said seriously. I've heard that the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael, at least today, are in most cases very supportive, and so just keep that in mind. Discuss with the Rav whether you should go to a Gadol for a bracha, for an eitzah, and so that's that. One thing, I don't know if we have time for this, it's already way over. Israeli Charedi, American Charedi, there's differences. Just because you're American Charedi doesn't mean that fits into the mold of Israeli Charedi. Israeli Charedi is less exposure to the secular world, less technology. iPhones in American Charedi world are totally normal, totally accepted, nothing. That's not the case in Israeli Charedi. Expectations of full-time learning as a norm for boys is part of the Israeli Haredi society. I don't know if it's necessarily the norm in all American Haredi society. Working, after a couple of years of learning is totally normal in American Haredi. In Israeli Haredi, I don't know if it encouraged to start working right away after. It's long-term learning is valued much more here. Israeli Haredi is much simpler lifestyle, much less materialism, much less things. So just because you're American Haredi doesn't mean you could just fit into some Israeli Haredi society. You have to realize there's a lot of differences. But in the past, you have to decide, if you're American Haredi, you're not so yeshivish, you're not so, you're balanced, you're moderated, and so a lot of times you'd have to make a choice. I either have to decide to become more from an Israeli Haredi or Dati Leumi, which is different than what I was used to in the States. Different norms, different customs, different. And today, I don't think you necessarily have to make that choice. I think there's, first of all, Ramat Beit Shemesh is a perfect example. I was American. I felt I'm a mainstream American Haredi from Monsey. I blended into Ramat Beit Shemesh without making any real significant changes in my lifestyle that I can think of. I definitely, in terms of ruchnius and everything, I definitely felt a tremendous growth here, but I didn't feel the need to conform, to change my identity, not at all. So I think Ramat Beit Shemesh changes a lot in terms of that. And I think also there's a new concept called working Haredim in Israel. It's growing. There's this concept that there's Haredim that also work, that are also part of the world, and they're not necessarily. It's a growing phenomenon, and the more that it grows, and the more that Americans move here, the more it'll become kind of part of the mainstream. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily to redefine your identity when you move here. What to expect when you make the leap? After you do the research, speak to the Rav, you get your bracha, there's still going to be a leap of faith. After all this work that you put in, you're still going to have to really have emunah that is going to work out. And it's not going to be easy, but that's exactly what gives you the schar. If everything was easy and on a silver platter and obvious and easy, and this is definitely what you have to do, and it's going to work out, then it wouldn't be such a big mitzvah. It's a huge mitzvah because it shows that you have emunah in Hashem, and things are going to work out. You have to do your homework, but at the end of the day, you still have to have emunah. It's going to work out. It's critical. You have to be prepared. Things are towards the end, right before you're about to move. I'm not saying this is going to happen to you, but it did happen to me, that everything seems like it's going to fall apart. Before, literally a month or two before I made Aliyah, everything was falling apart. It seemed like my plans were impossible now to implement. And on top of the fact that I started having these difficulties, which made it seem like it was impossible, I also got, I don't want to go into too many details, but strong incentives to stay, financial incentives and otherwise. And so I felt the carrot and the stick. And I've spoken to some other people and I've heard similar stories. Be prepared that towards the end, things are going to seem like they're falling apart, but don't worry. It's you just got to push through. And if you really want it, no matter how difficult it seems, you can make it work. I personally, in terms of hashkafically, how did I know that I felt like I was on the level for emunah? I felt like, how did I trust myself that I knew I could make this move? In my mind, I just made this decision that I really felt that whether I succeeded or I didn't succeed, I felt like this is something that I would regret if I didn't try. I felt like that by doing it, even failing, but by doing it and putting in the effort and having the right intentions and doing my best, even if I failed, I felt like it would have been the right thing to try. So I personally feel if you're on that level, that you feel like it's the right thing to do, and you regret not trying, then I feel like, for me at least, I felt comfortable going forward. Common pitfalls once you arrive. I'm really sorry about the time. I didn't realize how long this would take. Once you arrive, common pitfalls. Do not assume that your problems from the US will disappear once you arrive. This is a big one. People come, and I heard this from Rav Malinowitz, Zechrona Levracha, who passed away, who's one of the founders of Ramat Beit Shemesh. He says a lot of people come make Aliyah, they have problems, and they say, look, I made Aliyah, and my kids are having learning difficulties. Or I made Aliyah and I'm having Shalom Bayis problems. The problems that you had before you make Aliyah are going to continue when you get here. You cannot assume that by moving here, it's going to solve all of your life's problems. But you can't blame Aliyah for those problems. You can't come here and say, see, my kids are, off the derech. Most likely, if your kids are having difficulties or at risk in the States, they're going to continue to do so. But coming here doesn't change it. So, just realize that your problems are going to, if you're coming here to escape, you're not going to be you're not going to be so happy if this is just like an escape. Another thing is, don't be rigid. Realize that despite all the planning and despite all the research and the shtalos that you do, which you're going to have to do, things might not work out like the way you plan, and you have to be flexible and willing to adapt. Critical. It's probably the most important trait. Flexibility. If you're able to be flexible, then you could have a lot of success. Don't set yourself up for failure. A lot of people that move here, they set up and they have in the back of their minds, oh, I'm going to fail, so let me just keep my house available in the States and my job and my this and my that. And they have all these escape hatches that if something goes wrong, the minute that they go into difficulty, okay, I'll go back to the States. Don't set up yourself for failure. Assume you're going to succeed. Plan like you're going to succeed. And that's how you'll succeed. If you plan and put all these escape hatches in place, oh, if something happens, I'll just move back. You're blocking your own success. So if you want to come here to succeed and plan to succeed. Another thing is, I heard this from many people, don't go against the system. There's a system here. Do your research and pick the schools and communities that you feel are right. Get advice from Rabbanim to figure out what's right for you. But once you make that choice and you decide what's right for you, stick to it. Don't start saying, oh, to your kids that, don't make your kids feel like you disagree with the school or you disagree with the neighbors, the community. You need to feel like you're part of it, and your kids need to feel like they're part of it. Otherwise, they're gonna be confused. They're not gonna know how to please you. Like the parents are complaining about the school, they don't know. It's gonna confuse them, and it's gonna cause a lot of problems. So just do your research, pick a system, and just stick to the system. Another thing is values, American values. Don't assume Israelis understand American values. Israel, customer is always wrong. You have to kind of be prepared for that. It's not the same mindset. It's not like America where customer is always right. It's not true here. Another thing is, what's very difficult for Americans here is the lack of control of outcomes. American thinks, if I'm paying money for this, then I expect to get that, and it has to be at this time, and it has to be in this way. In Israel, the culture is different, and there's a lot less of that feeling of control. Like, you can go into your bank and plan to open up an account and have it start going, Monday, and you get there, and then there's this problem, there's that problem. A lot of times you could feel like, I can't control my own outcome. Like there's no way to control. So that's that. And another thing is timeliness. Is that Israelis, Americans expect things to happen right away. Israelis take their time. Israelis seem to be rude and difficult to work with in business settings. These are all stereotypes. These are all things. I'm not saying they're not true. But this is how Americans perceive Israelis. I would say, if I had to summarize the difference in culture, America, the concept is time is money. So the most important commodity is money, and time is just a factor of money. Money is really the real commodity. In Israel, money is time. Money is no longer the top priority. I can't say this across the board, but a lot of times in the culture, you feel it, that it's not. The customer is not always right. It's not the customer. Why in America is the customer always right? Because money. The customer pays. They have the money, so they're always right. In America, in Israel, they're not always right, because I don't care that you're buying it from me. Just because you have the money, that means you're in charge. Money is not the commodity. It's time. It's life. It's like Israelis are always trying to save time, cutting in line, driving quickly. They're not as thorough. They sometimes in the business setting, they're not as thorough and slow paced as Americans. They kind of rush through their work, and so it's an adjustment. It's not easy. It's an adjustment. But you have to realize there's a trade-off. So there are negative things in the culture, and it takes a while to adjust. Some people say 2 to 5 years to adjust. But there's a positive. Israelis, I was very positively surprised. Israelis do not smile and talk behind your back. That's common in America. Americans could smile, they're friendly, how are you, good morning. And when you turn around, they're talking behind your back and they hate your guts. Israelis don't do that. They don't also hold grudges. Like, you get into a fight with somebody over something or a conflict, they're not angry at you afterwards. It's over. They don't have that passive aggressiveness, which is part of like the often part of American culture, where things are superficially very nice, but on the inside there's a lot going on, a lot of resentment. Israelis are more open. If they resent you, they'll tell you, but they're not going to harbor any hatred, any negative feelings on the inside. It's a different culture. You just have to get used to it. It takes time, a few years, but you adapt to get used to it. And as long as you don't get frustrated by it, you realize it's going to take time to adjust. You'll do okay. And I just say one point is that life here is intense. It's exciting. It's bubbling. It's energetic. It's alive. But it's intense. And there's challenges, and everybody goes through challenges. And I found Israelis, they take a lot more vacations than Americans, even though they have less spending money and less extra income. But somehow I always see Israelis are vacationing. They're going to Zimmers in the summer. They're going, hikes, walks, relaxing, hotels. I notice in Israel there's like candy stores. Every other store is a candy store. Israelis like to have fun, I think, more than Americans do. And so I would suggest that very much. Like, when you get here, don't get so stressed out by, like, try to take your mind off of the stressfulness when it happens, and enjoy life. Take hikes, go places, get candy, enjoy life. Don't get stressed out. The most important piece of advice, what I'm ending on, is daven. I should have started with this. Coming to Israel it's already in davening. It's in benching, it's in davening, it's in the Torah, it's learning. We're always talking about Eretz Yisrael, but we're not actually processing what we're saying. Actually daven that Hashem should help you make it here. And once you get here, you should succeed. And once you get here, every day, say thank you to Hashem for that you're alive, that you're living here. It's a tremendous bracha. Appreciate it. Say thank you every day, and Mitzvah Hashem, you're going to succeed. If you do your homework, talk to the right people, you're prepared mentally, you did your physical preparations, I don't see any reason why any of you shouldn't succeed. Good luck, and I wish you a lot of atzlacha, and I hope this is helpful. And if you have any questions, if you want to be in touch, if you like the presentation, if you want to be hear more about some of the projects that we're doing, the documentaries that we're making about American Charedi life, or just want to stay connected, and also want to find out about new developments, new American Charedi communities that are springing up. If you want to stay connected, I suggest go on our website, nachliel.org, nachliel.org. Join, sign up, and you'll be part of our network. We'll contact you with emails of updates of what's going on. Some of the resources here I just want to mention for people that want more information that can help them with the Aliyah planning. Nachliel.org, that's my organization. Lifeintheland.org is an organization that has detailed summaries of the different Haredi communities in Israel. It has pictures, it has descriptions, it has all the details of different communities. It's a work in progress. It's not completed yet, but it has many cities already listed there that you could do more research on. AvirDeEretzYisrael.org has stories. I mentioned, to raising the spirits with your family, Shabbat stories. These are stories from, this is an organization that publishes stories of real people that made Aliyah and how they made it work, and has a lot of useful information, a lot of chizuk. So I suggest checking out AvirDeEretzYisrael. Chaim V'Chesed is an organization which helps people that are already living here with different bureaucratic issues that Anglos have to deal with. Newcomers Guide is kind of like a reference of all the directory of the community and different services for Anglos that are provided in Israel. Partners in Aliyah is a organization which, for people that are interested in making Aliyah, they connect people to people that are already living here. They're volunteers. They give them advice. Shira Paransky Project helps helps Americans sort through the Israeli bureaucracy dealing with medical issues. Mesila.org helps people with financial planning, financial issues in Israel, budgeting, figuring out what your budget might be, making a financial plan, etc. That's a good organization. Yedidim.org is an educational organization. People have educational issues with their children. They need advice. It's yedidim.org. So there's a lot of resources out there. There's much more out there. If you take the time, please be in touch with me if you have any questions, if I could help you in any way. The best way to be in touch with me is go online on nachliel.org and send me a message in the contact us area, and I'll respond as quickly as I can. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Right. Wow. Avraham, thank you ever so much for this inspiring talk. I think it gives chizuk and shows that no feat is impossible. And given all the trials and tribulations on the way, you can make it work. You can make your dream come true. And indeed, I think it's very much like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have the right attitude when you get here, if you know you can make things work, it's going to work out for you, and it's going to turn into a success story. I think we had a few questions along the way, but I'm pretty sure that you covered most of them. So probably there's no need in coming back. Perhaps just one question that was sent to me through chat right at the outset, which reads like this. What are some of the things you would tell us now that you personally didn't prepare for when you were making Aliyah?
Good question. I'm trying to think of some of the things that had I known when I was back there that I wish I would have known. The truth is that when I came into this, I was told my kids are going to go off the derech, and I wasn't going to have a parnasa, and that I wouldn't find a community, and I would have to fit into Israeli Charedi, which I'm not. And I was given all this information, and I was prepared for the absolute worst when I got here. So I don't think there's anything that I wasn't really prepared for. I don't know. I was prepared for, for a really difficult experience, and I was shocked and surprised at how not similar, my experience was to what people told me. So I would just say, just speak to as many people as you possibly can, and hear all those things, hear all the difficult things, but also speak to people that succeeded here and see that despite all of them, you could still succeed, and there's ways to do it if you try.
Right. Thank you very, very, very much indeed. I think maybe I take the liberty on behalf of the organizing party. I represent Toldot .ru, the Russian outreach site. We do have a Russian angle on it. So Ramat Shemesh is an excellent landing pad for Anglo Olim who have no specific Russian preferences. But I think if you define yourself as Charedi, but also have a Russian side to yourself, then there are other places in Israel that might open up new possibilities. I think probably as a general comment, when you say Charedi, probably you imply American Charedi or Frum. Here in Israel, the definition of Israeli Haredi may be different from what you have in mind. I mean, for starters, the present audience that is using the internet to connect to this call is already a minority by Israeli standards, who really shun modern technology, and it's only recently that Corona has given some incentive for Israeli Haredim to adopt modern technology. But so you do your research before you come in and really make sure that the community you want to fit into fits your hashkafa, your outlook, and your worldview. I think perhaps one personal tip of advice I'd like to share is that before you come, do your local Rav, your rabbi, to do some networking for you, so that he should make phone calls to various rabbonim here in Eretz Israel and introduce you before you arrive, because you'll then be greeted as an important guest as opposed to a stranger. So that setting the ground for your arrival through connections and networking does amazing things. And perhaps to finish off, I'll present my own community, which is based in Haifa. We already had 2 presentations on Haifa, and I'll take the liberty of reusing some of the slides I showed a few months back. But I think that specifically for Russian and English-speaking Olim, who are Torah Jews, Haifa offers an interesting perspective, really combining the best of both worlds. The community that I present is called Toldot, and it's a northern outpost of the Toldot Yeshurun organization in Jerusalem. Before I start, I'll just want to show you where things are on the map in Haifa. Of course, it's a city by the sea, and we have our own beach, which is a kosher beach, which obviously not this time of year, but starting on Pesach and finishing at the end of Sukkot. We have on alternate days, women and men only days at the beach. We're actually based in the area of the city called Neve Sha'anan, which is relatively upscale, but it's also very diverse in that you have several communities here. By Haifa standards, it's a religious one. Haifa standards means it's probably about 50% religious. So it's nothing like Beit Shemesh or other areas which are predominantly religious. But here you have living side by side different communities. You have a Charedi community with a big yeshiva. You have the Tilumi community, and you have all the flavors in between. So I think there's the coexistence and the respect that people have for each other that is the most appealing characteristic to me. That said, this is not an Anglo community. There are a few Americans here and there that we're familiar with, but you only find one English-speaking Shiur here. If you really after an English-speaking environment, there is another area of Haifa which is known as Achuza. Achuza is much more secular than Neve Sha'anan, but you do have clusters of Anglo speakers living here. They run their own activities. But also we have an area called Hadar, which is very mixed. It's closer to the downtown, and you have several Haredi communities here. We also have a Vishnitz area. It's like an enclosure almost with Vishnitz Hasidim. Long gone are the days when Haifa was considered a red city. So we have flourishing religious life here, and with all the facilities that a big city has to offer, such as hospitals and jobs, you also have a range of educational options. There are several Haredi schools for boys and girls. There is a Beit Yaakov school for girls. And unlike many other schools in the same Beit Yaakov framework, the one in Haifa does offer a bagrut or matriculation. You get a school living certificate, and alongside Haredi independent track, they also have different other flavors such as Chardal or even the Tilumi schools, which would also be considered frum by U.S. standards. I think for us, with 4 kids, it was important that we had access to different schools, both for boys and girls, and we actually switched several schools along the way, and specifically, say for the Haredi track, we have a famous yeshiva known called Nachliel, which is like 10 minutes walk away from where we live, and you can find a minyan or a chavruta to suit your level and your preferences. If you do want to go higher, and usually you have higher education in mind, Haifa is home to the Technion, which is actually adjacent to our area of Neve Sha'anan. I would say it's about 20 minutes walk, but you can take a bus and just get there within 10 minutes. And there's also University of Haifa, which is more humanitarian, which is also within easy commute. Now, specifically about our community, the Toldot Yitzchak was studied 4 years ago by a group of activists, myself included, all of Russian extraction, as you can see, and we've been growing rapidly. We had lots of things going on before the Corona hit us now almost a year ago, but we had various events going on, and we had people coming from outside of town, even as far as satellite towns known as Krayot. We're quite a mixed community in terms of the affiliation. We more like an umbrella community where people can keep their existing affiliations, be they Chabad or Charedi or Imdati Leumi, but we can still come together for Shabbatons and seminars. And you can see here, people wearing all colors of a kippah, from hats to white ones, and so I think that that's quite a unique experiment in that we don't really place any demands on whether a person may or may not have the internet at home or any kind of compliance with humras or specific rules. There is a commonly accepted standard of kashrut, as far as the common kitchen is concerned, but the people do go to each other's homes, and I think it's an interesting merger of Russian and religious and a little bit English speaking, although it's predominantly Russian. Okay, so we had tons of stuff going on before the Corona, and I hope things will continue now that vaccinations are in full swing, and hopefully by summertime we'll be able to return to our former glory. So with that, I think I just took my 5 minutes on Haifa, and if there are any additional questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you. Okay. I just had a question. Somebody asked, what is Dati Leumi? This is a national religious affiliation. These are, for all means and purposes, Orthodox people that keep all the mitzvot, but their priority is on living in the Jewish national homeland. And the Ashkafa includes the state as part of the divine revelation. So the very fact that you live here, that you serve in the army, that you have a job, is your way of serving Hashem, and being an active member of society and contributing to it is very much part of their outlook. So and they usually follow the teachings of Rabbi Cook about the Jewish national statehood. But okay, that's a subject for another webinar. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank Avraham once again. I think I just reiterate what he said. If anyone wants to get specific help or questions, he is welcome to connect to Avraham through his website at nachliel.org, which I think send the links through the chat. And you can also contact me through the Russian American Aliyah group. Myself and Sofia will be more than happy to take any questions. And also there've been a request to share the slides presented today. So we'll try and circulate them through the WhatsApp group.
Yeah, so the slides were very informative, and I think that a lot of people appreciate them.
Right.
Thank you so much again for so much work that took into this preparation. It's so much useful information. I'm very grateful for your presentation. I think you should become my Aliyah rabbi. Thank you.
My pleasure.
For this.
Thank you for having me.
I mentioned Avraham just before the session that the slides are so informative. They make for excellent offline reading. They contain tons of information and serve as an inspiration in their own right. But complete with an excellent delivery by Avraham, they make for a very compelling story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you will let me know if I can pass along your information if people have further questions, and I'm happy to share on all of our groups.
Right. There's been a question if this session has been recorded. Yes, they've been live streaming on both Facebook and YouTube. I sent a link a while ago. I'll try and repost the link to the YouTube just now, if I can still find it. Yeah, I think I have it. Yeah, I've just posted the YouTube link. Yeah. Yeah, somebody did it for me as well. So right. And there is also a recording on Facebook, which you can find on the Toldot Facebook page. And I believe, Sophia, you've also been copying the stream.
Right. I shared it on the Russian American Aliyah Facebook group as well.
Okay. So thank you very, very much again. It's been a bit longer than we planned, but I think very, very informative. So lots of chizuk, energy, and strength for us to get through this process. And I think for those of us who are already in Israel, we're waiting for you here with open arms, and really can go out of our way to greet you here and do anything we can to make the transition an easy one for you. Okay, so you're always welcome here.
Thank you. Thank you. It feels like we're coming home to family.
Okay, so welcome home, and on that merry note, have a great day back in the States and a great week ahead, and I'll be heading to bed very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye. Good night. See you in Israel.
See you in Israel. Bye-bye.